Hello and welcome back to my two-part ring menu construction kit tutorial. In the first part we have created this 2D number selection menu and now we want to turn this into a 3D version. Setting up a 3D widget is not extremely complicated, but it can be a little tricky when you do it for the first time. So it basically consists of three steps or three components. The first one is an actor which shows the 3D widget. The second one is an interaction component for the player so that the player can interact with that widget. And the third step is inside the ring menu. It's basically just a checkbox to make the ring menu aware that you are going to use it in 3D. So let's start with the actor. For that we'll create a new blueprint class, an actor, and we call it 3D widget actor. Let's open it up. And what we'll do is, for the sake of this demo, we'll create a very simple cube and just tweak it a tiny little bit, maybe to a scale of 0.25, 0.25, 0.5. Just for demonstration purposes. It's hovering above the ground a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so now we need to add a widget component. This widget component here will give us the opportunity, let's add it to the default scene root, will give us the opportunity to show a 2D widget in 3D space. As you can see here on the right side, we have this category user interface, and this is where we can set our widget class. Now let's go ahead and set it to our ring menu. As you can see, it's pretty big now. It's also kind of cut off at the ends. We can change that. Let's firstly give it a little more space. Let's say it's maybe 750. And we can scale that whole thing down a little bit to 0.4 maybe. That's better. Still a little big, so maybe let's go down to 0.2. Okay. We could maybe imagine this to be a table maybe, like this. I suppose it's still pretty big, but let's see. Let's see how it looks. So if we place this in our world now, we can see, oh, it's actually not as big as I thought. It's actually pretty small, pretty tiny. Let's turn this towards the player and play test it quickly to see how it looks. Yeah, well, it's not so perfect at the moment. It's still cut off. And it's too small, so we'll change that a little bit. It's also not a good idea to have it in a horizontal way, but need to try things to see if they work. Okay, let's move that up and that one to the front, and that one could go a little bit smaller still. Let's say 0.175, 0.175. Okay, and we need to make it a little bigger, as we saw. 800 by 800 should do the trick. It's still not working. Damn it. And let's move it up as well. Okay. Back a little bit. Okay. It's probably still pretty small, but it's only for demonstration purposes, so I always have an excuse that it doesn't look perfect. Okay, here we go. So this is our 3D menu now. But at the moment we can't interact with it. So we want it to be able to receive mouse as well as a gamepad input. So now we come to the second step. We need to tell our third person character that they should be aware of any 3D widgets in our level or in our world. For this, we go to our character and we add a component for the character as well, and that is called widget interaction. The widget interaction component allows our character to be aware of 3D menus and to interact with them. If we now look to the right side, we have also some options here. We could set the interaction distance, so how close do we need to be to our widget to be able to interact with it, and also the interaction source, so where should the trace be drawn which will interact. In our case, we want mouse interaction, so we should set it to mouse, but we could also set it to world. That would mean that it would interact from the location of our actor, or just center screen, for example, but mouse is perfect in our case. We could also show the debugging here. That's maybe interesting to see. So before we test, we need to make sure that we can see the mouse cursor, and in 3D space we won't be able to see it until we specifically set it to be visible. So let's do exactly that. Let's go ahead, maybe we'll just make some space here for the functions to be easier readable, our blueprint graph to be a little bit easier readable. Okay, so we need to go into our 3D actor and say as soon as someone comes close, we want to show the mouse cursor. For that, we need a trigger box. So let's use a box collision for that. Let's set that to 100. Now let's give the player some more space here. Okay, to 150 each. And in the event graph, we'll say as soon as someone overlaps that box, and this other one is the player, so third person character. As soon as that is happening, we want to show the mouse cursor. So let's get the player controller and say set show mouse cursor to true. And as you have probably already guessed, as soon as you end the overlap, casts to third person character, we'll hide the mouse cursor again. Okay, let's test. And if we come close to the menu, we can now see that the mouse cursor is appearing, and when we move away, the mouse cursor disappears. But the mouse cursor is not working, as we can see. And why is that? Because I have set the interaction distance to a value that is way too small. Let's go back to the 500, and that should do the trick. Now we can see it's working, and we can select things. But as you can see, if I click them, there are still more problems because the numbers do not appear here in the field, and also our camera freezes, and as we can see now, the focus has been lost. And so this is what we need to fix as well. So first thing, why is it not reacting to my clicks? That's easy, because it doesn't know that you're clicking. The reason for that is that you need to explicitly route your input to the widget. And you can do it via the widget interaction. For example, I could go ahead and say, here in my third person character, I say, okay, on left mouse button click, I can tell the widget interaction to do to press a pointer key. And this is exactly the function that we need, because here we can set a key that should be pressed. In this case, the key that comes in. So this will tell the widget that it should hand your mouse clicks over directly to any widget it encounters. And the second thing that we saw is that the mouse is still moving the camera. And we should suppress that as well. So an easy workaround for that problem would be to just create a flag, which you call menu open. And you just set that one to true as always, anytime your menu is open, and you set it to false when you close your menu again. Oh, and now I nearly forgot something very important. Apart from the press pointer key, we also need the release pointer key action here, because the menu relies heavily on releases as well as mouse button presses. Okay, good. So let's head back to our menu open. Where were we? Yeah, we wanted to include the menu open here. So in our case, we can go ahead and say in the player controller, which is, by the way, actually not the player controller, but we need our player character. Actually, we have our player character already over here. So let's just use that one. And we say set menu open to true as soon as you enter that area, and set it to false as soon as you leave that area. And now that we have control over when the menu is open and when it isn't, we can go into the Epic controls here and say, okay, for the mouse input, we want to be sure that the player is only able to move the camera while the menu is not open. So let's go ahead and insert a branch here to say this is only going to work while the menu is not open. Okay, first problem solved. Second problem isn't. So the numbers do not appear in our input widget. And that is because we don't have the logic yet. So there are several ways on how to tackle that, but one good idea is probably to do it directly inside the 3D widget actor. As mentioned before, this is a new menu. It's not a 2D menu anymore, and so that logic doesn't automatically carry over. We need to manually set it up again. So let's do that in the begin play, actually. So as soon as the actor is starting up, we'll say get a widget from the widget component. And with this widget, we need to cast this to my ring menu first to be aware of the fact that this is our menu, and then assign on button activated. And now we can basically set the exact same logic that we had before. And just for convenience, I will copy that over from here, from our third person character, to say, all right, when it's clicked and you don't click confirm, then we want to our text to be used and to be appended to the number UI. But at the moment we don't have the number UI, so this is the ring menu that's hidden. Actually, let's leave this functionality out for the moment, because at the moment we don't really hide the menu, so that's fine. But we still need our number UI, and this one comes from the character. So let's say we get our player character and we cast it to the third person character. From here we can get our number input UI, and from there we can get our number input. And this is now connected to everything and should work. Let's try. Fingers crossed. There we go. Now we can see that we can click the numbers and they appear down here in our connected widget. So that's perfect. So I would say that concludes our tutorial. Just in case you wanted to enable the confirm button as well, you would need to make sure that the third requirement is also fulfilled, especially if you want to like show and hide 3D menus. Then you need to make sure to go into your ring menu really easy and just to set this flag here in the general options, which is called is 3D widget. And then you set it to yes or to true, and then the menu makes sure that it's opened and closed correctly. So just in case you're building a 3D menu and it doesn't open and close correctly, then you've probably forgotten to set this one up. But yeah, that's basically it. I hope you found it informative and helpful and had fun watching the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.